Does God want a separation of church and state? Should Christians be voting biblical principles? Does it really matter who you vote for? Join Pastor Jerry Cook as he endeavors to answer these and many other questions over the next hour on Politics in the Pulpit. And now, Pastor Jerry Cook.
Good afternoon and welcome to Politics and the Pulpit here on your hometown station, AM 1220 and 98.1 FM, your hometown station, the show where we talk about the two things that you are not supposed to talk about, religion and politics. You know, one of the things I find interesting is when the promo for our show comes onto hometown station, there's always a few comments from our leftist friends out there. And of course, we love our leftist friends, might I just add that, because without you, there would be no spice in life. However, they always like to say, pull his tax-exempt status or something like that, as if they're assuming we're tax-exempt. Nevertheless, it's so funny to me that these guys on the left, yes, I'm starting off on a rant, folks, that these guys on the left love to proclaim separation of church and state, but yet that principle, even though that phrase is not found anywhere in any of our founding documents, they like to pull that phrase and interject that phrase whenever it's convenient for them, except when COVID happened. All of a sudden COVID happened and government and state went into churches and other religious institutions and told them to close down. Wait a minute. I thought we believed in separation of church and state. Well, anyway, that's a rant for another day, but I just thought maybe I'd say that considering I just saw some interesting comments not too long ago on the Hometown Station Facebook page. A lot of news is happening. In the last 3.5 weeks or so, we're living in some historical times. If you're a young individual listening in today, there are some things happening in the last 3.5 weeks that many of us, would not experience in a lifetime. But ever since that horrible, deplorable, bad debate performance by Joe Biden, things have just... one historical thing has happened right after the other. First, it was the debate, and then a little over a week later, it was the attempted assassination of former President Trump, and thankfully, he was not seriously injured. However, there was one death, and a couple of folks sustained injuries, and we're thankful that those couple of folks that did sustain injuries are back on their feet and about life. Just heard that the Secret Service is now saying that the Trump administration should, not the Trump administration, but the Trump team should consider not having any more outdoor rallies, which of course is ridiculous. If the Secret Service was doing their job, then obviously they could host outdoor rallies as well as indoor rallies. And then, of course, President Biden unceremoniously on X via a penned letter from, I'm sure, one of Biden's ghostwriters, basically said, "I'm not in the race anymore." And then Kimberly Cheadle was in front of the Congress on Monday asking questions. Well, let me rephrase that: not answering any questions, and then stepped down on Tuesday. So the news cycle is just moving at a fast clip. I wish the great Rush Limbaugh was alive today because, boy, he could make some sense and some great clarity out of the prevailing political winds of the day, especially now that it looks as if Kamala Harris is going to be the nominee for the party. With about 100 days, folks, until Election Day, November 5th, without receiving one vote by the Democratic Party. Remember, Biden got over 14 million in the primaries. I guess you could argue by default she did, but in reality, the top of the ticket is Biden. And let me just make some things clear to you and offer some clarity going into the next week and a half. Just remember that the media lied to you about the Russia hoax. They willingly lied to you. They lied to you about COVID, trying to tell you that if you didn't toe the narrative that was coming out of Washington at the time, that you were racist against the Asian folks there in China, or you had this or that going on, you're a science denier. They lied to you about COVID, folks. They lied to you about the masks. They lied to you about the dossier. They lied to you about Joe Biden's health and cognitive abilities, and they've done that willfully for several years. And so all I can tell you is that they're going to lie to you again. So please be mindful of that. And by the way, I was just basically blowing steam here because I'm waiting for my guest to come in, who has finally shown up, and I'll give him a break here because obviously he's coming in from the AV, and I'm sure there might have been a little bit of traffic. But my guest today on Politics in the Pulpit is no stranger to our show. He was with us about a couple of months ago. Steve Hill, of course, is a former congressional candidate who ran in 2022 against Mike Garcia, got 13% of the vote. He's a father of 4. He's a husband. He does things with real estate and property values. He's a comedian. He's a Marine. And he's an atheist and a Satanist. Steve Hill, good to have you here today, sir.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me back to your show.
Absolutely.
And that was 2024 that I ran for Congress. In 2022, when I attempted to run, I was arrested.
Tell us about that, Steve. What you can.
I can tell you what I can. Basically, it was for speaking out about the extreme cannabis grows in Antelope Valley, which Alex Villanueva and several other politicians, I don't think they like what I had to say, but coincidentally, somehow, I was arrested, and it was interesting. And I'm in court right now, and they're fighting like everything to keep me from getting into a courtroom. I've spent thousands of dollars, and I'm just fighting to get into court to get justice.
Gotcha. Well, I'm sure that considering that is still pending, I'm sure you can be at more liberty to talk about it later on.
Oh, yeah.
But I do remember you and I having that conversation off air before you came on the show the first time. And so we'll be definitely following what's going on there, Steve. First of all, let's talk a little bit about the new developments in politics. Let's start off with the fact that Donald Trump is not running against Joe Biden. He's running against Kamala Harris. What does Steve Hill think about Kamala Harris?
I think, for one, I met her in 2016 when I ran for state senate against Scott Wilk. I think she's a very intelligent person. She was born in America, contrary to some of the things I've seen on the internets and the dark web. But
and yeah, I would agree.
She's a prosecutor,
and I would agree with you. She was born in America.
Yeah, thank you. We don't have to go on a wild goose chase for a birth certificate this time. Yeah, I think she has the best interests of this country at heart. She's served for 3.5 years as vice president, so she's no stranger to, the executive branch of government. And I think since she has foundation of knowledge of how our law works and the Constitution from being a state attorney general, I think she's well prepared to fill in for the job, get in there and win, and bring our country back from the
last 3.5 years
from the thing that happened about overthrowing our government.
You mean the Trumpster?
Yeah, the insurrection.
Oh, gotcha. We'll talk about Orange Man Bad maybe a little bit later.
Yeah.
But I'd like to talk to you a little bit, Steve, because the last time we were on, a lot of folks thought, man, we were getting along way too much. And I said, well, there's nothing wrong with getting along with people. Yeah. And so I wanted to just kind of press you a little bit on some things, because obviously I'm now friends with you on social media, and I love your social media posts.
Yeah. I love my social media posts. You should have made it to my show Friday night at the Comedy Store.
I probably would have had a good time, but unfortunately, and
Yeah.
I think my son can vouch for this, did my cousin Greg show up? Yeah, I know. Yeah. Anyway, regardless,
I'll send you the recording. I recorded it.
I'm sure it was good. Would you have done a Don Rickles and call me out in the middle of the audience?
No.
That would have been fun, though.
Yeah,
You'd have said, "There's a Baptist preacher here in the front row."
Yeah,
you can tell by the money coming out of his pocket.
Yeah, you can tell by the halo around his head.
Well, there's no halo around mine. I'm definitely a sinner. There's no doubt about that. So tell us a little bit about what it means to be a Satanist, because obviously there are folks that have an idea of what that means. And of course, they think that means that they're, worshiping some, gold god somewhere that's got horns on it. Tell us a little bit from your perspective what it means.
Okay, from my perspective, it's something very personal. Actually, the Satanic Temple is an advocacy group for the separation of church and state. They've taken on some more issues, such as they have a sober faction and trans rights and LGBTQ community. But primarily, it's for the separation of church and state. And I joined up with them, I think it was around 2015, when I met the co-founder at a conference I was performing at in St. Louis. And I just think it's a great way to be an advocate for something that you believe in, And I don't know what they do, but I don't worship anything. I have no gods, no masters. I think it's an absolutely asinine, prehistoric rituals and just a prehistoric concept to worship a god. To think that there's someone out there watching this show we have, this thing we have going on in America. I think that to think someone is watching, controlling everything, and not intervening, especially like when kids have cancers, or when there's animals suffering, or children, or women being raped, or all of these atrocities that happen on Earth. To think that there's someone watching and can intervene with this power to do something about it is basically idiotic to me.
So would your contention be, Steve, because you mentioned this, you met this gentleman in 2015.
Right, Lucian Greaves.
And so would you say that prior to that, you were already moving in this direction of atheism?
I was already an atheist. I was at an atheist conference when we met. I just wasn't a Satanist. It's some mutual friends that we all got together. We took a tour. This was shortly after Mike Brown was murdered in St. Louis by the police. And we took a tour of Ferguson where all the riots had been and, basically Black Lives Matter started. And they convinced me to be a Satanist, and which I was trying to get out of it because I'm like, man, I'm already black. I don't need no more baggage to carry.
That is true. But so would you say that your parents had some sort of religious background or no?
They did. Oh, my mother was very, very religious. My father, not so much. I'm pretty sure he was an atheist, but just like a lot of black people in our community, if you say you don't believe in Jesus, it's like ridicule, hellfire that will come upon you.
Sure.
Because we have been mentally conditioned since slavery to believe in the God of our captors, which, again, makes no sense to me. It's like we're worshiping the same God of the people who used to own us. What benefit do you think we're going to get out of that?
So the God that doesn't intervene, would you be more inclined to believe in God if he did intervene?
Yeah. Show me some action. All of the atrocities. We have all these wars going on in the world. Gaza, Israel, Ukraine, Russia. None of these groups are atheists. I don't see one place on earth where atheists are killing one another. So to be these religious people and you're killing children and old women in Ukraine and bombing schools and hospitals, it's like the biggest contradiction on earth to me. Like, where's your God? Why can't he step in?
Do you believe in and I think you do, based upon the 7 fundamental tenets here that I'll get into in just a second, you do believe in the free will of humanity, that man has a choice and that things are not necessarily predetermined and fixed.
Right. And that's where education and the knowledge of history comes in at.
Yeah.
Like lived experiences. You know, we have laws against murder because it's not right to murder people.
Okay. Let me press on that if I could. By the way, we're talking to Steve Hill, former congressional candidate, and who knows, there might be something else politically brewing in your heart here.
Oh, there is.
I'm sure there is, and we'll know more about that as we get going. But how does Steve Hill come to the conclusion that that murder is indeed wrong?
Because every man will agree with you. Every man that's living will agree with you that murder is wrong.
But why?
That's why we have laws against it. You're taking someone's life. Life is special to me. Life is extremely special. That's, you know, I'm a humanist, basically.
Yep.
So, you know, life is everything. From the oldest person to a newborn baby, it's life.
So what makes it special, though, Steve?
What makes it special?
Yeah, or unique.
Unique? It's because we have the ability to interact, love, learn, live with other human beings. That's what makes it special. Is our relationships, all of our lifetime. It's not how much money you have, what kind of fancy car you drive. It's the other people who are enjoying the human experience along with us contemporaneously, and it affects our lives. We all have to live here together.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it special. When you see the people you love, like your kids, they're going to school, they're living a happy life, they're not in danger, they live in a decent neighborhood. That's life.
Yeah.
And that's special.
In the words of Frank Sinatra, that's life. That's what all the people say.
That's what the people say.
Riding high in April, shot down in May.
There you go.
What do you think of Richard Dawkins? The God Delusions.
I think he's a brilliant man.
Yeah. Would you agree with every little point that he's made down through the last, let's say, decade?
I don't agree with no human being
Good.
ever.
All right.
I will. It's, you know, this Jesus guy of which you speak. I don't agree with him.
I haven't brought him up yet, but Richard Dawkins was interviewed, I think it was last December or maybe just prior to December of last year in Britain, and he was decrying just how the Muslims had kind of taken over Great Britain and some of the Christian symbols and imagery of Christmas were starting to kind of dwindle. And here's what Dawkins had to say about being a, quote, cultural Christian. See what you think about this.
I was slightly horrified to hear that Ramadan is being promoted instead. I do think that we are culturally a Christian country. I call myself a cultural Christian. I'm not a believer, but there's a distinction between being a believing Christian and being a cultural Christian. And so, you know, I love hymns and Christmas carols, and I sort of feel at home in the Christian ethos. I feel that we are a Christian country in that sense. It's true that statistically the number of people who actually believe in Christianity is going down, and I'm happy with that. But I would not be happy if, for example, we lost all our cathedrals and our beautiful parish churches. So I count myself a cultural Christian. I think it wouldn't matter if we substituted any alternative religion. That would be truly dreadful.
Let's get back to on the other side of the break. I want to get your commentary on what Dawkins said there. I actually agree with like about 85% of what he said. But when we come back on this side, on the other side of the break here on Politics in the Pulpit, we'll hear what Steve Hill has to say. Former congressional candidate, comedian, Marine, dad, everything you can think of, and maybe something else in the future when we come back here on your hometown station. All right, we're back here live on Politics in the Pulpit. This, of course, is the Bishop of Santa Clarita, Pastor Jerry Cook, and you're live on Hometown Station, 98.1 FM and AM 1220. We're talking to Steve Hill, no stranger to our show. Steve Hill, of course, ran for Congress. He's ran for other state offices as well here in California, and, of course, may do that again here shortly, and hopefully he'll come on the show and announce that if that is the case. But Steve Hill is also a humanist. He's an atheist, and we're having a conversation here, a respectful one, I hope, based upon his understanding of things, based upon my understanding of things. And we just left the show with a clip of Richard Dawkins kind of bemoaning the fact that Islam and the Muslims are kind of taking over Great Britain, and a lot of the Christian ethos, as Dawkins put it, is kind of taking a back seat. And he actually says he loves the hymns, loves the carols, he loves the cathedrals and the buildings, and calls himself a cultural Christian. Obviously makes a distinction. He doesn't believe in the Bible, obviously. It's the magic book and the flying spaghetti monster. But what are your thoughts about Dawkins when you hear him as a fellow atheist?
I think if what he's trying to convey is what I'm gathering in my senses, is that I can understand his perspective. I mean, I grew up in a religious family. We grew up listening to Christmas songs and gospel music and decorating Christmas trees, even though at a very early age I thought it was all poppycock. But I can understand, you get that feeling of togetherness, of oneness at a certain time of year. Right, hang on the mistletoe.
Oh, there it is.
All that. And it's just that kind of like a seasonal thing with me. But I wasn't like rushing out to go to church for Christmas services or nothing like that. I still didn't believe in a higher being or this superior, omnipotent person who watches all and sees all. I still didn't believe that. But you can partake in all of the religious trappings and the decorations and, everybody. You go to a store that time of year and people are a little bit nicer. People are a little friendlier, and it just seems like some of the stress is off in life. Yeah. But then January 1st,
it's all back
to being jerks.
So there's a longer clip, Steve, for that Richard Dawkins clip there. And he goes on to basically say, and you'll have to take my word for me, that he thinks that there is a fundamental difference between Islam and Christianity, and he actually doesn't want Islam to have the priority and the precedence that Christianity has had in England. So what I'm gathering from Dawkins, Steve, is that he actually thinks it has contributed positively to Great Britain, and that Islam would not. Your thoughts?
Islam has contributed?
No. His thoughts is that Islam is taking priority over Christianity, and he thinks that Christianity has actually offered some positive contributions to Britain in general, and thinks that Islam would not. I was just wondering what your thoughts on that would be.
Well, it's kind of like picking the lesser of two evils to me.
Okay.
But you go back and you consider the Dark Ages, where it was, believe like us or we'll kill you.
Yeah.
The Muslims are kind of the same way. Kill the infidels.
Yeah.
And it's like, really?
Yeah.
Isn't one of those commandments in everywhere? It's like, thou shalt not kill.
Yeah.
But yet, murder seems to be like a valid solution to a lot of the answers in Muslim. I mean, when they hit those Twin Towers, they were screaming, Ali Akbar, God is good.
Yeah.
And people want to say, oh, religion had nothing to do with it. Yes, it did. Religion has a lot to do with all of our wars and a lot of killing.
I would agree that Islam had everything to do with what happened on 2001, September 11th. In fact, it's like I always tell people, not every Muslim is a terrorist, but most terrorists tend to be Muslims. But let me go back to the Dark Ages thing for a minute, because I think we very briefly touched on this on a Facebook post where I kind of made one of my
jabs.
My jabs. I like that meme you put up with me looking out of a sewer. Saying the guy that likes
that pops up only to disagree.
Exactly. So I would want to make a distinction, and I want to do this respectfully because I know there might be some Roman Catholics listening, is that I see a distinction between biblical Christianity as given in the New Testament and Roman Catholicism. And the reason why is because Roman Catholicism didn't really originate as a church until 325 under Constantine.
Constantine was, yeah.
Yeah, and so therefore, I believe that there were Christians that predated that. Obviously, from the book of from the New Testament. I understand you don't believe the New Testament, but let's just go with my thought process for a minute. So there were Christians for 300 years, and then all of a sudden, here we have this mammoth state church connection of Roman Catholicism, where the emperor is himself also the religious figure, which of course I would completely disagree with, and you would too.
And I would too.
Yeah, and so therefore, the Roman Catholic Church, not only were they religiously bearing the sword, but they were also politically bearing the sword. And so I believe that anybody that didn't believe like them got killed. And in fact, I could show you historical records of what are called the Anabaptist Brethren that got slaughtered during the Dark Ages because they didn't believe in baptism the way the Roman Catholics believed it.
Right.
We believed in immersion, which was a picture of death, burial, and resurrection. They believed in sprinkling, and therefore...
Therefore,
we're going to kill
you. You got to die. You must die.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that I would never do that. But I know that our Catholic friends have done that in the past. Maybe not the average parishioner even understands that sitting in the church.
Of course not.
But I mean the hierarchy, the archbishops, the intelligentsia going back, they definitely did that.
Yeah, that Council of Nice, I think they were the same people who put out that edict about going to get slaves from Africa.
No, absolutely. I agree with that, and I think that's all bad. So I would make a distinction, Steve, between what I would consider New Testament biblical Christianity and then what became the Roman Catholic system in 325, 350 AD, which is 300 years removed from the New Testament. So I would just offer that distinction.
Okay, but now listen, this is just the way I think. 325 AD.
Yes, sir.
How many years ago was that?
Quite a few.
Okay.
Quite a few centuries.
We can't even get history right here in America since we got here. They're taking books out of schools because there's things that they don't want you to know. I graduated in 1979. I didn't learn about Malcolm X until the 80s. I mean, there's things right now, like they say, he who wins the wars write the history. How could anybody hold anything valid from centuries ago when people were using grass to wipe their butts with? How could people give any validity to that? And it's been changed and reinterpreted and redirected and rewritten. And now I've got a version, you've got a version. Here's a New Testament, here's the Old Testament. Come on.
Well, I went to a private school from 1983 till when I graduated in 1994. Then, of course, went to seminary. In my private school, which was a Baptist private school, I did learn about Malcolm X. I learned about Martin Luther King Jr. I learned about all those folks. Just because some schools didn't do it, that's not my fault.
Yeah, well, I went to school in Missouri, and
that was probably your problem.
I haven't been back there since I graduated.
Yeah.
Went straight to boot camp, and I've never been back to live.
Well, what my point is I did learn about those things, and I think that those that part of the historical narrative is absolutely essential, because I would consider the '60s relatively recent history.
Me too.
But of course, we have a whole generation that's below us that if it didn't happen on TikTok, it didn't happen,
Right.
But unfortunately, you and I are speaking the same language there. Let's get back real briefly to the God thing.
Okay.
Is it possible in Steve Hill's mind that there could be a God?
No.
Not even the possibility?
Not even a remote possibility, because I've seen so much human suffering. Children's hospital, cancer wards with children with cancer. Where's God?
So let me argue from the basis of design for a minute, if I could. And I'm sure this is all stuff you've heard. Might as well give you stuff you've heard.
Yeah.
What did you drive down in?
A vehicle.
And was it a Ford, Toyota?
It was a Cadillac.
It was, man.
You know how black people drive Cadillacs.
I want to go there, but I'm not going to.
Chicken and watermelon in the back seat.
And the fried chicken in the front. But I'm assuming you recognize a designer for that vehicle.
Yes, it was a lot of engineering, research and development.
A lot of brain power.
A lot of math.
Yeah.
A lot of math.
Yeah, a lot of designer work.
Yeah.
So so something as complex as a vehicle, or not complex depending on your brain capacity, has a designer. but something as complex as your eye does not.
Mother Nature designed my eye.
Mother.
Nature.
Whoa.
Right.
It's a female.
It's a female.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me about Mother Nature.
Mother Nature, which in the design of everything in the universe, from that Big Bang and carbon and the progression of time.
Mother Nature gave us the gases too?
Remember this earth was all water. Remember that?
I actually don't remember it.
Yeah, but well, might have been a couple of months after you. But anyways, this used to be, and we kind of I do believe this, that over thousands, millions of years, evolution. We came from the sea. We developed. You know how you have those amphibious frogs and fish and things that could come out in water, and then lungs developed. So I'm just thinking over thousands of years, millennia, we developed into what we are now. Do I think that humans will look like we look in 10, 15 centuries from now? Probably not. We'll probably develop something because of global warming. We'll probably develop some kind of organ that will cool us off. We're going to have to, because it's getting hotter.
Yeah.
Right now it's 108 in Palmdale.
It's pretty warm. There's no doubt about it. Now, you would basically say that me, as a Baptist preacher, believes in a book, which would be the magic book, right?
The magic book.
The magic book.
Just let me tell you, if you took the Bible away from religious people, they would be left just with what I'm left with. Dealing with humans as they are, how you treat me, the love you feel for me, I could give that love back without a book.
Actually, I can love you with the book too.
But why is it necessary? Because now you're going to interject your rules and regulations
Not
from
necessarily.
that book.
Why would it be unnecessary?
And
though?
all of your scripture. You know how you guys keep going back
not
to
necessarily. Not necessarily. I can love you with the book or without the book.
Okay, well,
I'm just telling you from my perspective. I don't need the book to tell me to love you, but it does help me that it does tell me to love you.
Okay, so why do you bring that book to church and read to other people?
Because
if God was real, why couldn't He talk to them Himself?
Well,
why do we have all these pastors and preachers and bishops and deacons?
Why
is it always them telling you what God said, when if God was real, He could just tell me Himself?
Here's what you said in one of your Facebook posts. If God would speak for Himself, the fact that He does not speak, and He allows any lunatic who comes along to speak in His name, proves that God is quite imaginary. So would I be a lunatic?
No, you're not God.
No, but would I be a lunatic? You said, and He allows any lunatic, that would be the preacher, the bishop, whoever, comes along to speak in His name. I speak in Jesus' name. Am I a lunatic?
No, that doesn't necessarily make you a lunatic.
I'm just going to go back to your post here. It says, if God would speak for Himself, the fact that He does not speak, and He allows any lunatic who comes along to speak in His name, proves that God is quite imaginary. Now, am I a lunatic?
No, I wouldn't classify you as a lunatic.
Okay.
But now,
why would you post that?
Are there lunatics who have used the word of God
absolutely
to spread chaos and confusion amongst the people?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. We're on the same page there.
That's just a generalization.
Okay. So then what you should have done is accept Pastor Cook.
Yeah, with the exception of Pastor Cook and a couple of other pastors that I know.
Yeah. Now, somebody said this. Actually, this is you. Sorry, but informing atheists that you'll pray for them is not even remotely helpful to any conversation. You know it means nothing to us, and we know it's your passive-aggressive way of saying F you. Now, what I want to know, Steve, is if we're wanting to create a dialogue together, I'm just wondering how that helps.
How that helps? It
how does
just
that
brings
help?
the realization to make people think that next thought is like, I don't need, you're praying for me.
Yeah.
And it's like,
well, I'm not praying for you, though, but I'm just saying.
That's like doing the minimal you could do, which would be nothing.
Yeah.
And that's like taking it one step further.
But I just want the person who wrote this, and of course, you posted it, but you didn't write this.
Right, I didn't write it.
But this person is presuming to know what I'm thinking in my mind if I say I'm praying for you. I can honestly say, from all the times I've ever said it to anybody, I've never been passive aggressive in thinking, well, just F you, because that isn't me.
Right,
now,
right.
Now, I think my son, who has lived with me and known me, he knows that I'm not passive aggressive. I'll just tell you.
Right.
You know, I think I'll just tell you straight up. Let's go through these 7 fundamental tenets right here, because there's some of them I agree with.
Okay.
Number 1, one should strive to act with compassion and empathy towards all creatures in accordance with reason. Now, are some of your posts not necessarily compassionate and empathetic?
Some of them?
Are some of your
Some
posts?
of them are more on the comedic side.
Okay.
Used as a conduit to get people to think.
Shake them.
To get people to think.
Okay.
The realization of a zillion people praying.
Okay.
The realization of kids being slaughtered in Stoneman Douglas School, and then thinking somehow that magically, if we just use thoughts and prayers, no more shootings will happen.
Okay. I don't think that thoughts and prayers are going to end shootings. Because there's a point here that you say people are fallible. That's point 6. I actually think that's true. I would actually say that the biblical term is totally depraved. And I agree. We're fallible people. And because we're fallible, we are going to have tendencies to do evil things.
Right?
Now the question is,
Right,
but what's evil to Steve that's not evil to me, though? Oh, Steve, make sure Satan's on the line. Tell him what you want. So, Steve, what would be considered evil?
Evil?
I mean, why do we even have
Not
that principle?
Evil?
Yeah.
What's considered evil?
Yeah.
I think racism is evil.
Okay.
I think coveting your neighbor's wife is evil.
What if she's good looking?
Even more evil.
Okay.
Double evil.
Okay.
If she's good looking, because now you know you're going to get in trouble.
Okay. Especially with your wife.
Right.
Okay.
You know, this almost has that touch of the whole free will thing.
Yeah, well,
Where, God gave us all free will. Okay, common sense. We're all born with a certain and specific amount of common sense. And then we come along and we're taught by our parents, our community, schools. We're taught to know better, to do things. We don't need the 10 Commandments in a school to tell the kids that killing is wrong.
You're right, because I actually think that God wrote that in our heart before we ever saw it written on a piece of paper.
Okay,
but that was my sermon that you were there.
With that being said, what about all those slave owners in the South? They were exempt from God's love in their heart.
Bad examples, every one of them. Bad examples,
and
every one of them.
Douglass tried to tell everybody, tried to tell the pastors and the preachers in the South,
and a lot of them
utilizing the Bible in order to conduct evil.
You are absolutely correct, and we'll talk about more about that on the other side of the break when we come back here on Politics in the Pulpit. This is, of course, your holy host here on your hometown station. We're talking to Steve Hill, and we'll be back in just a second. All right, we're back here for our final segment here on Politics and the Pulpit, and I would be remiss to not mention my boy Derek Cook. He is my 12-year-old. I like to say with my wife, he's going to be my retirement ticket one of these days. But he is a soccer fanatic. He loves soccer, and his team, the LAFC SCV team, sends 2 teams to the Nationals. A couple weeks ago, he was in Denver, and they made the finals. So, unfortunately, they didn't win outright, but they were really, really close. And so, really proud of the LAFC and Derek and the rest of that team there that made it all the way to Denver. Talking to Steve Hill here. We're on our final segment. Jerry, what's the what time we out of here? 58:50. Man, I'm glad somebody knows how to do math. Let's quickly pivot, if I could, Steve, to the presidential election and Black Lives Matter. I'm sure you're aware of their statement on Kamala Harris.
No, if you could
enlighten
me just a bit.
All right, so this is from immediate release. This is July 23rd, 2024, straight from their website. It says, Black Lives Matter demands that the Democratic National Committee immediately host an informal virtual snap primary across the country prior to the DNC convention in August. We call for the Rules Committee to create a process that allows for public participation in the nomination process, not just a nomination by party delegates. The current political landscape is unprecedented, with President Biden stepping aside in a manner never seen before. This moment calls for decisive action to protect the integrity of our democracy and the voices of black voters. While Joe Biden wasn't our preferred candidate, we cannot ignore the troubling actions of the Democratic Party. And there's three things real quick, and I'll let you comment. The DNC refused to host debates during the primary, even though a vast majority of Democratic voters wanted them. Number two, the DNC changed the primary schedule and created rules that made it almost impossible for non-Biden candidates to appear on the ballot. And thirdly, following the primary, where millions of black voters weighed in, after one poor debate performance, the DNC elites and billionaire donors bullied Joe Biden out of the race. You agree with any of that?
No. For one, I'm already biased. I'm not a big Black Lives Matter fan.
Okay. So they don't speak for you?
They don't speak for me.
Gotcha.
They don't,
All right. That's fair.
Yeah. They, I was going to go into some of their discrepancies, like purchasing houses with Black Lives Matter money.
I'm totally with you on that.
And, we have a system in place. We have a vice president. And I've never seen a vice president receive so much disrespect in my life.
Tell us about
the natural progression. What's been happening in my lifetime, and I'll be 63 next month.
Looking good. Black don't crack.
Yeah, it just wrinkles a little bit. But the natural progression of the presidency, you transition from vice president to president.
Yeah.
So if Biden decides he's too old to run, doesn't have the energy, can't see 4 more years, the next logical step would be to boost up the vice president. And for all the Democrats, in which, let me tell you, I'm not a Democrat anymore. I left the party. Mm-hmm. But for everyone to a few months ago, or after that disastrous debate, everyone going, oh, you can't make it, or who are we going to find? Now we have no one. And she's sitting there was like the most disrespectful thing in my life.
I agree with you. I think the Democratic Party has been disrespectful not only to Joe Biden in pushing him out the way they did, even though, frankly, it's popcorn for me. I'm just sitting back watching this.
Of course.
I also think it's been disrespectful that they took so long mulling the fact that we have a strong black woman that is sitting here going, I'm the vice president.
Right.
Why aren't we considering
me
first?
Why are we even considering
other
Gretchen
alternatives
up in Wisconsin and
the white
governors
woman,
or
the white governor here?
Considering them when there's someone right there, basically in succession, the next person to take the job would be the vice president.
Yep. Did you hear about the fact that when President Joe Biden, of course, this isn't really make a big deal anymore because he's going to talk tonight. But I guess he had some sort of medical episode in Las Vegas last week, which is why they closed all of the rest of his talks and rushed him onto that airplane. And you can see how.
Well, he had COVID, right?
Well, I understand that, but I think he had something else going on as well.
He had something pulmonary artery
there was
blockage.
There was something else going on, but I think COVID might have been the cover.
Yeah, and unless our government is open and transparent, which we know they're not.
No.
You're not going to find out. So it's speculation, and that's how conspiracy theories get started.
I'm going to give Steve Hill the last word because we've got 2 minutes left here, son. Steve Hill, say something good about Pastor Cook, and then Pastor Cook will say something good about Steve Hill.
Pastor Cook, I came to your church. I saw your services. I spoke with the people in your congregation.
They're all nuts, but they like you.
I saw nothing but people in a positive environment, coming to get whatever guidance they need to live a happy, successful life without murdering people and being nice to your neighbors. And to me, that's a good thing. And just for you to have someone like me in here to discuss things outside of your religion, things that you would probably be diametrically opposed to, shows an openness to create a conduit for conversation. Therefore, conversation leads to understanding. Understanding leads to peace and love. So that's what I have nice to say about you. And on one more thing, there is no God.
I was waiting for that. I'm going to quote Isaiah, where it says, "Come now, let us reason together." And I do believe in sitting down and reasoning together. I think that's a reasonable thing to do. And I do make a distinction between biblical Christianity and what has become organized religion in your eyes and my eyes. And there's a lot of faults with that, and especially with the way it has globally been looked at over the course of the last 2 centuries. However, one of the things I think is important for people to understand, especially on my side of the aisle, is if you don't engage with folks like Steve Hill, then you can't have any impact at all. And I think it's important also to strengthen your own sword. Iron sharpens iron. And I think it's important to be able to engage with somebody outside of the context of your squawk box.
Bubble.
That's right.
And Santa Clarita, as we know,
it's a bubble.
It's a bubble.
It's a bubble. If you are wanting to see Steve Hill, tell me a little bit about the next comedy tour.
I'm going to be at the Ice House sometime in August.
Okay.
Haven't picked the date yet, but I will be at the Ice House in Pasadena, America's oldest comedy club. And I'm going to be putting some stuff on YouTube. And
I'm going to try my best to be at that Ice House.
I'm
going to bring Jerry with me. Hey, we got to come to the end of the show here. Steve Hill, thank you so much for for being part of the show today. We'll see you next week. Aaron Wilson, running for Hart District, will be on the show next week. We'll see you then.